Hello everyone, let us see digital painting in Photoshop. So let us start. We are going to do the digital painting of the President of India, Draupadi Murmu. So let us start digital painting. So the way we are going to do the digital painting is we'll be using the smudge tool. So here we have the smudge tool and we will start doing the painting with this smudge tool. But before that we are going to select the subject. So to select the subject, we need to go to Object Selection Tool and we can just use the option Lasso, or we can simply select the option Select Subject. Here we will simply select the option Select Subject. So just with one click we can select the subject. Right. So here we have selected the subject. Right. So now what we can do is we can just select the hair properly. For that what we need to do is we'll go to select menu and here we have an option select and mask. So we can just click on it. So once we have selected the select and mask, here we have an option refine hair, and make sure that you are using the latest version of Photoshop. So only in the latest versions, that is 21 and 22, this option refine hair is available. So we can just click on that refine hair, and after that here we don't need to change any of these values. We can just select this object aware option, and just if we come down here we have an option decontaminate colors, and the final option that we have to select is output to, and here output to the option is new layer with layer mask, and we'll simply select this particular option and then we'll click OK. Right. So now we have a mask. Right. So once we have the mask, so now what we'll do is we'll simply right click on the mask, or right click on this layer with the mask thumbnail, and we can just select this option apply layer mask. Right. So now we have just masked out the unwanted part of the image. Right. So now what we'll do is we'll slightly scale her down. Right. And we'll also do one thing, that is we will just select the lasso tool, and we don't want till the hands, we want only till her chest. Right. So here I have drawn a selection with the lasso tool, and we will also apply some feather here. So let's apply some 12 as the feather radius, and simply click OK. And then we will invert the selection, Ctrl Shift I, and then simply delete. Right. So we only need this much part. Right. So now what we'll do is we will just scale her a little bit. We'll also create some space for our document. So for that what we are supposed to do is simply activate the crop tool, and then we will just stretch our document. Right. So this much space is enough. Right. Right. So once we are done with the adjustment, now we are ready to start digital painting. So to start digital painting, So what we are supposed to do is, here we can see the smudge tool. So we need to select the smudge tool, and what the smudge tool will do is it will just stretch the areas. See, if I simply just try to paint over her forehead, so we can see how it is changing the part. So what we are supposed to do is, we need to set the smudge strength as 36%, and the next thing we are supposed to do is, before starting painting with the smudge tool, we are supposed to do a small change. That is, we need to apply a filter. We will apply a filter called unsharp mask. So we need to simply go to filter, select sharpen, and in the sharpen list we have the option unsharp mask. So this is a very appropriate filter here. So if we apply this filter, so this filter will help us create an oil paint effect over her skin, right? And we need to set the amount to, let's say, 90, and we will just put the radius to 8 pixels, right? And now let us start painting. All we have to do is, we will zoom into the image. So just zoom into the image and select the smudge tool, and make sure that the strength value is 36%, and we will just start from the forehead. So we need to just reduce the size, and then let's start painting. So we can zoom and paint. So it takes a lot of time, and just patiently we have to paint the entire skin portion. So once we are done with the painting with smudge tool, the next thing we are supposed to do is, we will use the dodge tool and burn tool to just paint highlights and shadows. So to brighten up the highlights and to darken the shadows. So simply select the dodge tool, and we need to paint only on areas where we see the bright tones or the bright shades. So select the dodge tool and make sure that the range over here is mid-tones, exposure is 50%, and we'll simply reduce the size of this dodge tool icon and just paint it slowly. Right. So this much is enough. And now we will select the burn tool and make sure that midtones are active for the burn tool also, and exposure has to be 50%. Right. And we need to check where the shadows are. So the shadows are at the corners, so we can just paint the shadows. So there are some shadows near her neck. So we need to make sure that we don't paint too much. Right. Right. So this much is enough. We'll now be painting the dark and light skin tones. So what we'll do right now is we'll take an NP layer above the active layer and we'll first paint the bright skin tones. So for that we need to select the screen blending mode and we'll select a normal brush. We will select a soft rounded brush and we will just reduce the flow for this brush to, let's say, 14%. Right. And now we will just click a brightest skin tone here. Right. So here we have picked the brightest skin tone, and we just need to paint these skin tones. So we just need to paint a very few skin tones here and there. So we have already painted with the dodge tool, but we can also just try to paint with a brush, but we need to just reduce the flow. So something like this. So don't paint too much of bright tones. Right. So this much is okay. So now we'll just rename the layer bright tones, and we'll just take one more layer above the bright tones layer and we will rename it dark tones. Right. We'll pick the darkest tone here, so I think this one. Right. And now what we'll do is we'll slightly increase the flow to 10% and we'll change the blending mode to multiply. Multiply is a dark blending mode. It will darken the areas of the image. So now we will paint the dark tones. So simply we have to paint, but we need to make sure that we paint the dark tones only in the places where we find the shadows. So something like this. Right. So once we are done with the dark tones, now the next task is we will take a merged copy of all the existing layers. To get a merged copy of all the existing layers, we will use a keyboard shortcut, that is Ctrl Alt Shift and E, or in Mac Command Option Shift and E. Right. and we can hide all the layers below this active layer, right? So now what we'll do is we will paint some dual lighting on either side of her face. So to paint dual lighting means two different colors. Just we need to take a new layer above the active layer, and we'll just select the brush tool, and we will change the blending mode to color, and we will first pick a color, and we will just use somewhat yellowish color, and make sure that the flow value is only 10%. Increase the size of the brush, and we will also make this layer into a clipping mask. We will clip this layer to the subject layer. So simply we'll hold Alt and just click in between the subject layer and the empty layer, right? So what will happen is, whatever we paint, it will be confined to this subject only. It will not go outside the subject, right? So we can just paint some yellow color on the left side of her face, something like this. And we'll just take one more layer, and we'll click the layer again, right? And this time we will paint a pure red color, and we'll paint red on the right side, or something like this. So this is a dual lighting, right? So just make sure that the flow value is only 10%. Don't try to increase the flow, right? Now we'll paint red color on her lips. We'll just take a new layer, an empty layer. We'll rename the layer as lips. We'll select the pen tool, and we'll simply draw a selection or draw a path around her lips, and make sure that the option path is active for the pen tool, right? And we will use the direct selection tool to adjust these points, right? So once we are done with it, we will convert the path to a selection. Simply we will hit Ctrl Enter or Command Enter in Mac, right? So then we will fill the selection with a pure red color, but before that we will give a small amount of feather to it. So we will give let us say a 3 as feather, right? And now we will fill the selection with a pure red color. Simply we will use Alt and backspace or Option backspace in Mac, right? Now we will change the blending mode to multiply, so we can see the change, but we are actually missing the highlights. So what we'll do is we'll simply double click on this lips layer to open the layer style dialog. So in the layer style dialog, we can see the options over here below the blend if. So we can see underlying layer here. So what we'll do is to the right side of the underlying layer we have a slider. This slider will control the highlights or the bright areas. We will simply move this slider to the left. So we can see here we are getting back the highlights, but we will break this slider. To break the slider we need to use Alt or Option in the Mac. So simply hold Alt and then break this slider. So we can see here, right? This looks better, right? And in case we think the red is too much, we can slightly reduce the opacity. Right, this much is okay. Right. So now our next task is we need to take one more merged copy. So all we have to do is we'll simply use the same old shortcut Ctrl Alt Shift E or Command Option Shift E. Right, and again we will hide all the layers below it. Right, then what we'll do is we can slightly paint on her hair. So what we can do is we can select a brush, we can select a natural brush. Right, so once we have the natural brush here, we need to just zoom into her hair and we need to just try to paint. But to paint we first need to select a particular color here. So we can just paint some bright areas. Right, we'll just take a new layer, we'll select the screen blending mode and we can just check how our strokes are appearing. So we need to just reduce the size of the brush and we can see here. So just I am painting some bright spots. The flow value is very less, we can slightly increase the flow. So we can see here. So don't make it look artificial, just we have to paint carefully. So that's it, and we can use the blur tool here. So we can use the blur tool to just soften the brush strokes. So something like this. Right, and we can take one more layer here, and we can also paint dark color strokes over here. So we can just select one dark tone here and we can just use the same natural brush and we can start painting. So you can see here. And here also we can paint dark tones. Right. So once we are done with it, and we can just select the blur tool to just soften some places on her eyebrows as well as near over her hair. So something like this. Right. Right. So now the next task is we will take one more merged copy. So we'll use Ctrl Alt Shift E or Command Option Shift E. Right. Then what we'll do is we'll simply take a duplicate of this layer. So simply hit Ctrl J or Command J in the Mac. Right. Then what we'll do is we will use a blending mode which will give some painting look, which will give a realistic painting look. So that will be either overlay or let us say soft light. So we can use soft light. Right. And now we will just merge these two layers. Simply we'll select both the layers and we will simply hit Ctrl E or Command E in the Mac. Right. So this is better. Right. So now the next step is we will just hide the layers below this particular layer, and we can just apply mask to this, and we can simply remove the unwanted portions of the image. We will increase the flow value to 100%. We will select a soft rounded brush, and we can erase some unwanted places near her hair here. So we need to be careful. We should not lose the important parts. So this is this we need to do it carefully. Right. So the next step we are supposed to do is we will create a background, and before that we will also apply a hue and saturation to the image. So we will simply go to image, adjustments, and we will select hue and saturation, and here the hue and saturation dialog appears. We can just play with these settings. We can simply move the slider so we can see how the image is changing. So we can just find a color that suits us, and here we can also play with this saturation option. So we can slightly reduce the saturation. Right. And we can also just try to reduce the lightness. Right. So before proceeding, what we will do is we will just create a bright spot inside her eyes. So what we'll do is we'll just select a brush tool, a soft rounded brush, and then we'll just click inside her eyes. So that's it. So here we have created a bright spot. Right. So this much is okay. Right. So now the next step we are supposed to do is we will create a background below this active layer. And so what we'll do is we'll just hold Ctrl or Command in the Mac, and we'll click on the create new layer icon at the bottom of the layers panel. Right. And now what we'll do is we will select a brush, a fancy brush, with which we can actually just paint some colors, some fancy colors. So I will start with a pure red color, and here I am selecting this Kyle's Ultimate Pastel Palooza brush. We can select any kind of brush. You can find similar brushes in Photoshop. Right. And we will start painting different colors. So once we are done with these colors, now we will go to filter, we'll select blur, and we will just apply a Gaussian blur. So something like this. And we will just put the radius as okay, 47 is okay. Right. And one more thing we'll do is we will also create layer below this colors layer. So we'll simply hold Ctrl or Command in the Mac, and we'll just click on the create new layer icon, and we will fill this bottom layer with pure black color. We'll simply use Alt backspace or Option backspace, right? And then what we'll do is we'll select this colorful background layer, and we will go to filter, and here we have an option camera raw. Just select the camera raw filter, and what we'll do is we will just apply a vignette to this particular colorful background. So here inside the camera raw, here we have optics, and in optics we have this option vignette. We'll reduce the vignette here, so we can see here, and we can also just go to effect, and also in effect we have this vignetting. So we'll just reduce the vignetting value. We can see some black color at the corners, so we'll just simply click OK. So we can see here, right? And now what we'll do is we will just select the subject layer, and we will right click over the mask, and we'll select apply layer mask, right? And now what we'll do is we'll just apply a simple layer mask to this particular subject layer again, and we will just use a brush, a soft rounded brush, and we will just paint or get rid of the corners here. We want the corners to be soft, so we'll just increase the flow value to 100%, and then we will just get rid of the corners. We will make the corners soft, right? This looks better, right? So the next thing we'll do is we will just take one last copy. So simply we will use Ctrl Alt Shift E or Command Option Shift E, right? And then we will just use a curves adjustment layer. So to use the curves adjustment layer, we will just select the adjustment layer at the bottom of the layers panel, and we'll select curves, and here we have the curves, and we will slightly reduce the brightness, right? That's it. So now we have completed the digital painting. So this is the final output. This is the painting of India's President Draupadi Murmu. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Please do like, subscribe, share, and if you have anything to say, do comment. See you again.